Why tenders matter. You may not be aware of this, but in 2025, the current year, the Australian government will release between 80 and $100 billion worth of tenders. And this surprised me. I was surprised how big this was. They've set targets to award 35% of contracts up to 20 million to SMEs and 25% of contracts up to 1 billion to SMEs. That translates into $20 to $30 billion of opportunity annually.
This is the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners looking for cool online tools, apps and strategies to make business easy online. My name is Nick Cree and I'm your host. Each episode features a guest expert demystifying the online universe, sharing inspirational ideas and providing tested real-world strategies to help you get the most of what's available online to grow your business today. Don't be a slave to your business, get your business working for you. Subscribe now and get some great content and ideas for you and your business today. And that brings us through to our main event tonight, and it's introducing Rob Machin. And he's a tender specialist, and he is here to talk to us about tenders tonight. So just a wee bit of background about Rob. He is down in New South Wales and Sydney. He has been he's not a has-been. He is a tender strategist. He's an executive coach, and he is a former CEO of a number of organisations. He's been on the Australian Private Hospital Association. He's worked across government, health, education, social enterprise, and he has managed budgets of over $400 million. I have problems just managing my month-to-month earnings in the business, but he's done a whole lot more than that. And he's also overseen about $20 billion worth of contract wins or tender wins. So he knows what he's talking about. He's been on both sides of the equation, submitting tenders and also reviewing tenders as well. And tonight's session is really about, are you tender fit, and how small businesses can win government and big business contracts there through a process. So he's got a process for it. So let's put your hands together. Welcome to the stage, Rob Machin.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my presentation up. Okay, that's good.
We did practice this earlier on, and it's there somewhere.
Just bear with me a second. I will be with you.
And for those that have just arrived, welcome, Sandy. Good to see you in the room as well, too.
Okay, here we go. And now we put share.
All right, there we go. The share screen is starting up, and we are cooking with gas.
Excellent. So let me just take this bar down so I can see it all. All I've got is people across my screen at the minute. Okay. So what I'm going to speak to you tonight is about tenders and whether or not there's an opportunity for small or even medium-sized business to play the game with government. 20 odd years ago, I'd had a 25-year-old career in health. And in that later part of my time in health as a director of New South Wales Department of Health, we went to tender all support services in the health system. We followed a Maggie Thatcher model in doing that. And the unique thing about that was that we put out all of the non-essential core services to the private sector to see if we could get things like parking and security and IT and catering cheaper and better than we were providing them ourselves. The unique thing about the Thatcher model was that in-house teams could form and bid for their jobs and work. And that's how I got introduced to tenders, and I managed that process for New South Wales. And as a matter of interest, over the first 12 months of that process in reviewing systems, one example would be at a major teaching hospital, cleaning services, which were $10 million a year, within 9 months reduced to a little under $6 million. And across New South Wales Health in the first year, we saved $80 million recurrent expenditure. So I've been on the other side of the fence, writing specifications and interviewing and accepting contracts by the private sector to help us run a more efficient health service. It was a consequence of that a number of private sector organisations contacted me and said, "We don't know how to do this stuff. It's so complex. Can you help us?" And there's a long story to that road, but I eventually went out into business on my own and had a company called tendersuccess.com.au. So if you look back, if you can see that slide, 40 years experience in doing this. And I realized there was quite a science and art behind the whole idea of tendering. And when you mention tenders to most small business people, they sort of break into a cold sweat and think, "I did that once, it cost me a fortune, and I think the system's rigged." And really, what's the reason for that? Well, they find them confusing. They find the bureaucratic, red tape, jargon, information, and frankly, a waste of time and money and resources. And most people have failed at it, and as a consequence, they're just not interested in pitching for tenders. But let me share something with you. Most people, or most small business in particular, believe tenders are out of their reach for all the reasons we've just mentioned. And yet, tender opportunities, if you can envisage this roadway here, really behind each and every one of these doors, that a lot of people look at tenders and they walk past them. They feel it's not a door that they can enter, it's locked, they can't get into it. And yet, really, the tendering and responding to tenders is the ugly sister of sales and marketing. Marketing people don't like doing them. They're too hard, they're too difficult. They consume a lot of BAU time, and success rates for a lot of people, unless you're committed to preparing yourself for a tender, is just overwhelming. So they think all of these doors are locked, but they need the right key. And that key is to be prepared for and gear your business up to respond to and win tenders. That's critical. So I've seen small businesses, one-office businesses, win significant government tenders because they knew the rules, they knew how to play the game. And I'll give you a brief story. Some years ago, there was a man in Western Australia, and he actually had a contract with the local or the regional council for haulage. And his haulage was for road base and the like, building roads out in the sticks and the like. And he invested $500,000 in a truck, and he'd been doing this for a number of years. His wife was on the phone at home, and she ran his office. Anyway, all of a sudden, some, I guess, bright spark policy advisor decided that this contract needed to be put out in the public interest to test the waters and see if they get better service, improve pricing on the job he was doing. And this man wasn't making a fortune. He was making a reasonable living. He had a big investment for just a man and his wife, and took a lease on a $500,000 truck to do this sort of work. And what happened was the council put the tender out several times and failed to get any takers. Anyway, eventually they got really serious. It went out, and somehow this man found me. And he asked me to help him. So I looked at his systems and the like, and really he just put a 1 or 2 page letter in saying that, he gave the price and expected people to respond to that information. He'd won the tender, he'd done it well. I'm sure he knew people in council, he'd done it for a while. But as we looked at that, he was really exposed. I mean, tenders have got very sophisticated in the last 40 years, particularly government tenders. And so I looked at, he had no work health and safety system, he had no quality assurance program, no sustainability policy, no DEI policy, all the things that government considered just basic requirements, he didn't have. So I sat down with him and worked through that process and established those systems for him. And eventually he put his tender in and he won the tender. And not only did he win the tender, the work available to him for winning it doubled. He doubled his income and his revenue over a year from his 400,000 to best part of $1 million a year, which set him up for the next few years. And that's one of the great advantages. If you can win one of these tenders, you've got a guaranteed revenue stream for a number of years in an environment where business, I'm sure you'd agree, is fairly unstable. So why am I here today talking to you about these things? Well, it's to show you really that tenders aren't just red tape and difficulty. They're actually golden handles to these doors. And if you have the right skill set, the right information, all of those doors will open. So what we'd like to cover off tonight to talk to you about these tenders and how you or even your clients might benefit from them, I'm hoping you'll take away these things. How to pick the right opportunities and avoid the wrong ones. Some people see a bright, sparkly opportunity, chase it, and they either don't have the capability, the capacity, or the systems and processes in place which will give them an opportunity. And one of the things we do is assess people's ability to go for various tenders. And of course, we've been talking, and I know that the Brisbane Chamber are holding a luncheon in the next couple of weeks, inviting would-be suppliers to government for the Olympics to meet with government departments who will be tendering for services. So 7 years out is not a long time in the Olympics. So if you've got your sights on something that might be appropriate for you at that time, then now is the time to start preparing. And the other thing I would guarantee for you is if you start doing that now and getting your ducks in a row, you're going to pick up other tenders in the interim period, which will give you even a greater opportunity to supply tender services and products because you've got tenders and experience in that area. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look about how to get you tender fit, how to write tenders that solve customer problems and don't just sell what you're good at or your product, and how to work with governments and big business, even if you've never actually tendered before. So,
Do you want to change your slide, Rob?
I will, yeah. Good idea, slipping away. Oh, sorry, that's my haulage man, isn't it? Yeah. So these are the things we're going to look at tonight. I'm sorry for that. I was so tied to my information I'm trying to get across. So working with big business, even if you're not tendered before. So let's move on. Why tenders matter. You may not be aware of this, but in 2025, the current year, the Australian government will release between 80 and $100 billion worth of tenders. And this surprised me. I was surprised how big this was. They've set targets to award 35% of contracts up to 20 million to SMEs and 25% of contracts up to 1 billion to SMEs. That translates into 20 to $30 billion of opportunity annually. So let's take the lower part of that. That's 140 to $200 billion worth of small business opportunity before the Olympics come on board. So there's real money available right now for those who want to invest in the systems and processes that meet the criteria required by government to win those tenders. Government has an incentive to do business with small business. That, by the way, is directly from the Department of Finance. I'll just share a couple of little experiences with you that shows you how small these tender opportunities might be. There was a guy on the lower north shore of Sydney some years ago. He was this guy, he was a gardener, a bit of a landscaper, and ran his own business. Billed about $120,000 a year, paid for his equipment, and he got a fairly modest income out of it after he paid for all of his expenses. And he came to me and he said, look, one of the local councils have put up a tender for about $500,000 worth of parks and gardens. I've got the tender document, but there's things here they're asking me to do, like sustainability policies, work, health and safety, so on and so on. I don't have a clue. Can you help me? So we sat down and we wrote those plans and policies for him and set up the systems he'd need to drive those forward. 4 months later, he won that tender. The employer had to take on 3 people to help him deliver it, and he was billing close to $1 million after 12 months, doing parks and gardens in a fairly big lower North Shore suburban area with plenty of trees and parks and that to be maintained. So there's a one-man show that went from working in a business to working on his business. Another guy I worked with was a doctor, a radiologist, and he had a specific area where he was working doing chest x-rays for the government, and the government, as it does, decided it was going to out for a federal contract, and it wanted a large organisation. This guy was a one-man show working out of Liverpool, and he was doing this, and we got together. He employed me to help him get his tender up, and it was an ANZ, Australia and New Zealand contract. Well, he was running 9 clinics at that time where he would gather their x-rays and report on them and point out people that had various issues. And we worked on that for about 4 months and put a bid in. And we took his 9 clinics to 27 clinics across Australia and New Zealand and increased his annual revenues from, let me just think now, I bet that's not him, but that was what he was doing. They went from something like 12 million to $35 million a year. And so he really took a leap forward in a matter of months. We had to put things in place of all these systems and the like, but we developed an advisory board for him too, to give him the creds and show that he was being managed and monitored and there were systems in place to ensure that he was running an efficient business. And governments need to know that. They want to know what your business is like, what you do, and that you can operate and provide as an agent of government to the customer base the same quality of service they can give if they are delivering that service directly themselves. So why would you consider tenders? You know, when you think about the difference between that and chasing business, they may be a little harder to acquire a tender, but they do give you a fair and equitable basis for competing with your competitors. The criteria are written down in the documentation. The process is transparent. It's subject to probity. And if you're prepared, you can compete with anyone. And size really doesn't matter, providing you can meet those service requirements. And a single win, as I've demonstrated in those 3 cases we've looked at, can double or more your turnover. They can lock in recurring revenue over several years. And one of the features about recurring revenue streams over this, 80% of people, this is across the Western world, who have a contract, 80% of people who hold contracts remain the incumbent when the contract is renewed. So you're investing maybe in a 3 or 5 year contract, which might have a renewal of 3 years automatically, or you're in a very favoured position to be able to go and win that contract again. Now, for those of you that are business advisors, I'm sure it's obvious to you what that would do to the value of your business. Give you an example. If you want to sell a cleaning business, a property services business, the value of that business is usually the value of the contracts you hold. And so you can build up a significant business there. And like all good business planners, you should have an exit strategy, and that would be an opportunity to ensure that you have and maintain value in your business. So the multiplier effect of tenders is that by adding these to your business, they can cover your recurring costs. They can, I often say to people that if you've got some decent tenders that you're servicing provided by government, I'll have to say this, they're not the quickest payers in the world, but they do pay, and they give you a significant revenue stream. And then your private sector clients you go after, they tend to be the cream on the cake, if you can do that rather well. So let me ask you, what would it mean if you could, for yourself or even your client, increase your revenues by 500K or $1 million a year? What would that do to your profitability? So that's something that all of us might consider when we're thinking about the idea of responding to tenders. Some of the work I've done and observed over the many years I've done this, there are lots of different ways of looking at tenders, but these is what I've found to be the common winning ingredients. And I've done tenders to the value of $7 billion, which took 4.5, 5 months to do. It involves 70 subject matter experts, including advertising agencies, actuaries, legal firms, all costing specialists and the like. And won on 2 occasions a contract which was one of the top 3 in the world in terms of size and complexity. And I would say whether you're doing a tender at that level or the guy with the landscaping business, the one thing I've deduced is the principles are exactly the same. There's a methodology that is reliable. It doesn't have to be as detailed, obviously, but the methodology is reliable and it works for everybody that tenders. So these are some of the ingredients that you might consider if you want to prepare yourself moving forward in tenders. You need the expertise not only in being able to have the capability and capacity to deliver a service or product, but you need to know how to respond. For example, nearly every contract I've read from government says value for money. What would that mean? How would you define value for money? Well, I'll give you a quick way of defining it. That means to government either increase my revenues, and that's a rare thing. There's not many departments in government that actually gain revenue, but you either increase my revenues or decrease my costs. That's a very powerful measure of value for money, but there's one even more powerful, and that is, as government, that you reduce my risk. Governments will spend more money on supplies and services if their risk is managed. It's a critical factor for them. So in doing these, it's about strategy analysis, and this is critical too. One of the first processes I would take somebody wishing to bid for a piece of business in government through is a bid, no bid analysis. Are you up for it? Where do you sit alongside, and this is the second, where do you sit alongside your competitors? What are your universal selling or unique selling propositions? What are you win? Why are you different? Or are you just an also ran? You haven't had the contract before. There are your competitors there that have had them. You might be wasting your time and resources. You've got to have a compelling response. One of the things that government looks for is innovation. A brief example. Some years ago, we were doing a bid, and one of the things we discovered, this was around providing insurance services to New South Wales government. There was a massive shortage of people within hospitals and health services to manage workers' comp claims. They were undertrained. So what we did, we went to the University of New South Wales and asked them if they could develop a course, a single unit course, to help us lift the standard of these people within the public sector hospitals, to lift their standard of being able to manage workers' comp claims. And there's a massive expense of these. They can, at one particular time, the exposure of New South Wales government to workers' comp claims was $70 billion. So these can get out of hand very readily. But they developed a course, and eventually it became a unit in a graduate certificate diploma, and eventually it made its way into a new degree, a master's degree called the Management of Business and Technology. And we continue to do that, and the group that won that tender provided scholarships for the public sector, so they simply pay for a course of study for people. And a lot of those went on to extend themselves into postgraduate certificates, diplomas, and master's degrees. But that was an innovation where we addressed a critical skill shortage and added value. So then you get into how you present these things, and there's a certain amount of artistry as well as there is about science of doing these. But this sort of summarizes an opportunity analysis. A tender strategy, an RFT, and that bid, no bid we've just spoken of. Who are your competitors? And there's lots of ways we can find out these things. Stakeholders, who's involved, who's making the decisions, who's advising whom. The gap analysis, when people are asking you to submit, do we fall short? Are there gaps we've got to make? Things we have to do to be compliant with the specification. Now, a lot of people run straight into this as a tender strategy, but my question to most businesses is, does the tender strategy reflect your business strategy? Because if it doesn't, why are you playing in this area? I can almost guarantee, and I've said this several times, to reduce your cost of and success at winning tenders by 100% by going in and determining what they tender for and what they don't tender for. It's a very simple formula. And then you've got your resources to do the things you really want to win in a fulsome way, in a way that can often get you over the line. When you're spreading yourself too thin, you lack resources to do it. So there's a whole process there of opportunity analysis around doing this work. So what does it mean to get tender fit? Well, if you're just responding to a tender when it's being delivered to you, and you're probably aware there are a number of people, particularly in the construction industry, that sweep the markets each week and deliver to construction companies a list of tenders that were published this week. Well, I would contend, unless you have a relationship inside the organisation you're going to tender to, and I don't just mean knowing the receptionist in the front office, I mean knowing people who are technical advisors, decision makers, financial decision makers, then you waste your time bidding. One of the more flippant, I guess, sort of illustrations I would give you, who of us would go out with somebody for our first dinner and accept a marriage proposal? The truth of the matter is we need a relationship with the people we're dealing with before we know we can trust them. And in the sales jargon, they tell us people don't buy products and services, they buy people. So you've got to know people and trust them to be able to do it. So to do that, to understand their needs, we need a relationship with them. Again, I repeat, does the opportunity fit your strategy? Is it the target market you want to be in? Is your offer compelling? Does it outbid your competitors? Do you have the resources and a plan? One of the things government's very clever at doing, if similar bids are going, let's say you win a major bid with education and health go out for something similar, they'll want to know they want names of people and resources that you will apply to their bid if you win the bid. Are you resourced enough to be able to cope with that as well as other bids and the like you're doing? Then have you got a good story? Is your writing persuasive? Is your document professional grade? All of these things are expected by government as just being run of the mill. They look for the most minor things to eliminate you from the process. And there's a lot of techniques you can use to make sure that you've complied with the tender bid. I'll give you one as an example. When I did some of the major bids, we would get the company's legal firm to go through the bid and the response item by item, design a matrix that showed where we complied and sign it off legally that it complied. And I did that because one bid we did in Victoria was worth $1.5 billion. We lost the contract because they had a minor issue. What I didn't know at the time, they had an issue with the state manager of the particular service and just wanted them out. But the reality was they got us out on a technicality. So from then on, when we do major bids, I always get a legal analysis and compliance register signed off to show the person to whom we're pitching that if they want to go down that path, we've already got legal advice and sign off on it. So getting tender fit for the client is, as I mentioned, are we capable? Do we have capacity? They are critical in ensuring that we can step up and perform the work we promised to do. Because all of these tenders, you get invited to a shortlist, select, you present, you negotiate, and then you sign the contract for the delivery. And what my experience is with large tenders, the bid you put in rarely equates equally to the contract you sign. It's an invitation to go and get involved with the process, and then you will argy-bargy, you'll negotiate around the things that are truly important. The other thing is that's really critical for small business, and they find this cumbersome, and I'll give you some shortcuts of this. Do you have the key policy systems and processes in place? And these are a sample of them. Work health and safety, diversity, equity, inclusion, environmental and sustainability, modern slavery. Can you imagine the average small business complying with all of this? Now, one of the tricks simply is if you look at the legislation for work health and safety, and I'm a bit out of date with it, You have to have a certain number of employees before you have to form a committee. If you have a committee, and I think it's 50 employees, and that could have been updated, I'm not sure. A lot of people think you've got to meet monthly, you've got to do this. But what I've found in small organisations, and given government wants SMEs to get involved, they recognise they don't have the same resources, risks and issues of major companies. So one of the things I've found is that we can combine in maybe one monthly meeting all the things around work, health and safety, diversity, environmental sustainability, quality assurance, all of those things can be at a single meeting. And in fact, after you've done that for a month or two in a row, often you only need to do it quarterly. So you can make something that seems ridiculously complex and overwhelming. Once you address it, you could do this and really reduce it to something that's very manageable, and you're still then complying with all the government's requirements. So one of the questions I get asked is, what if I was enticed to go into tenders and try and acquire business, what would be the first three things I would ask you to do to prepare yourself to get tender fit? Well, step one, I'd say do a gap analysis. Audit your business against one live tender. Or you could even get older ones. If you register with government to get tenders, you might have failed at a tender application in the past, but you will find in those, and you can get them online very readily just by registering. I've registered with Queensland Government, New South Wales Government, Victorian Government. You get old tender, go through and look at their evaluation criteria for something in your space. Look at the requirements they have. Audit your business against what they're requiring. The other thing I would say to you about this, if you can pass the test of meeting compliance with government, you've audited your own business. And out of it, you will find a play out of, say, getting tender fit, an opportunity and a play to get your business running as it should. It literally will set you up for sale if that's something in the back of your mind at some point. One of the things you can do simply often people leave these issues right to the end, and they've got to get 3 years of financial accounts. They've got to get their latest ISO audit. They've got to do all these things at once, which costs enormous money. All the certificates of currency for their insurances, private, PI, PL, workers' compensation. You just build a tender library. You just make sure that the last 3 years of all of the documentation you need are in your library. You can lean on your broker to make sure he looks after a library for you of all your insurances. But my belief is you could be 75% prepared to respond to a tender by having decent housekeeping in your business. And the beauty about that is when a document comes out and they want you to apply for a tender to supply products and services, you've got the headspace then to be innovative, to look at innovation and things and ways that means you can meet that government requirement without running around trying to backfill all of your document and get your accounts and your documentation up to date in a hurry and under pressure. Everybody runs out. I've been brought into tenders where they've got 4 weeks to do it, and they're in the last week and they need my help. And I just look at them and laugh. It's just an absurdity. You can do a lot of this work, be prepared, and so save yourself a lot of time. And here's a concept a lot of people are not familiar with in managing tenders: a capture plan. How do you create and what is a capture plan? Well, this is around your own business strategy, where you're going to get your business. You might say aim at health or defence or education or Premier's Department. And what this means is a capture strategy and plan is about who you're going to target, who you're going to get close to, who you're going to build relationships with. And this might be based on the product or the service you offer. It might be training, it might be all sorts of things. And then you develop a capture plan to have relationships and create relationships with these people prior to the tender even dropping. What that means is, too, you can influence what's in the tender if you've got a good relationship with them. And often that plays into your game and is a vastly different contention than you actually being delivered a tender and saying, look, this is in your space, and starting at that point. You should have a continuing, ongoing exploratory relationship with your target customers and clients before a tender ever drops. And as I say, you wouldn't accept a proposal of marriage at your first dinner or coffee appointment. You need to have a deep relationship, know the people and trust them. So Brisbane Games are coming up. What I'd say to you here is there's a great opportunity, if this is a serious opportunity for you, to get fit. I guess you'd imagine that most of the Olympians that will perform in 2032 are in training now. We could use that metaphor and say, well, if I really are serious about doing something of this opportunity, let's get training now. You could be working to get your personal bests, your PBs now, by going for other tenders in government leading up to these events. I mean, this will come and go. It's quite a good focus at the moment, but each and every year you've got access to $20 to $30 billion worth of contracts that the government are going to buy services and products from small to medium enterprise. So here's my challenge. Don't walk past those doors anymore. Pick up the key, turn the handle, and step into those opportunities waiting for you. If you decide to do this, you'll find it's easier than you thought, and that to do it just requires work and preparation. And now you've got that opportunity to build your competency and your fitness as we move towards something like the Olympics. But don't let that stop you for one moment going for tenders that are being published every day of the week. Nick, I think that's probably enough. It's quite complex. There's a lot more material, but I've tried to trim it so it wouldn't overwhelm people.
Fabulous. Excellent. Rob, any questions from anyone? Just hit the raise hand button down the bottom there, or just come off mute and ask any questions. So really good opportunity, while we've got Rob here, he's just got such a lot of experience in this sector. All right. Anything in chat?
I'll dive in then.
The chat too.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Rob. That was great. Do you really just coach people, or will you actually help them apply for the tenders as well?
I've done, Craig, I've done 100-hour weeks, 8 weeks in a row to get a major bid over the line because people in the business didn't know what they were doing. So I've actually done it. It's tough work. One of the things I would say to you is if you decide tendering is a way to grow your business, I'm very, very keen on transferring skills to your organization to allow you to do it. I've been into an organization, done it. 3 years later, the tenders come up for renewal. There's not a person that was involved last time, not a piece of information in the play. Start again. Well, they paid me again for the same activity, which is a bit silly if you're using this as a growth strategy. But look, I've done that. It's not my favorite way. I certainly would guide and coach and direct, for example, project management meetings once or twice a week. But I do really expect that people who are experts in their business can write about their business. I can give you strategies. I'll give you writing templates. But at the end of the day, if you ask me to come and do something around mining, I would not be an expert in that field. I can only guide you in the process. So I do help people, but I'm not as hands-on as I used to be.
Great. Thank you so much.
That's right.
All right. We've got David Bates, that is.
Yeah. Hi, Rob. Hi, Nick. I was just wondering, do you know much about NDIS? Like, do they hold tenders for a lot of stuff? What's the go there? I've got ideas around that, and I was just curious.
I was one of my coachees or clients was the person who worked with the first CEO to design the process and for the national NDIS. And the first thing she'd say to me, they never implemented what we designed. And as a consequence, then the person in charge of Victorian NDIS who wanted to get out desperately, I coached her into our own business. So yes, look, I'm familiar with it. I know it has been traumatic. I know it has failed on many, many counts. Are you looking to bid into it, or?
Well, I want to establish a relationship with them, and
Oh,
I
right.
suppose 10 days, one way to go. I don't know.
Well, totally. They'll tender for that business. I mean, if you want to you've got to start building relationships.
Well, that was my second part. Is how do you go about doing that? You said relationships are important with the decision makers, key parts. So how do you meet these people?
I mean, it's a lot simpler than you think. Try knocking on the door. And what I mean by that is, I'm presuming you've got a service or something you'd like to provide to NDIS.
Yeah.
Right. Now, they're obliged to deal with small to medium enterprise, which I've demonstrated today. So if you've got a particular service or in a particular geographic area provide a service, don't wait for the tender to come out. Go and meet the people responsible. Talk to them. My name's Dave Bates. I come from Port Macquarie. I provide this service. I'm building this service. We certainly would like to be a tenderer in the next time you put this out, but we'd like to get to know you. Tell me, and you ask questions like this, for example, of all your current providers, where are they letting you down? What is something you like to be able to do? Look for the chinks in the armor and where you can create a relationship and just talk to them and say, well, buy them a cup of coffee every 3 months or something and catch up. I'm developing systems and process. Is this the sort of thing you would find value in the NDIS? And there's not a person in there that wouldn't talk to you about these things.
And where would you find these people?
Say again?
Where would you find these people?
Well, they're all local NDIS people in various regions, but go to the head office, go to contact them and say, look, I work in this region. Who would I speak to about the potential in the future of being involved in tendering to provide you services in this area? Could I have some names, please?
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Turn up to the front desk, say hello to the ladies. Look, my name's Bubba. This is what we do. We're looking to get involved with NDIS or supply with services and products over a period. Could you please give me a list of people I might speak to?
I mean, do I need a reputation to do that?
Well, let's put it this way. You don't need a jail term in your CV.
Probably helpful.
Look, but I mean, if you've done anything, it's very difficult doing business with government when you've got no history, no experience in anything. And I'll tell you why. They are custodians of the taxpayer's dollar. Right? If they're going to spend it on behalf of the taxpayer, they need to know, you know how to do things, you know what to do, you're reliable, you've got the financial backing and or balance sheet and resources to deliver. They're not going to take a risk.
Are they going to want your financials and that sort of stuff?
Usually they will poke into everything like that. They want to know you're secure. And often I'll tell you, but there are a couple of strategies. Often they will have a service in a region and they'll say, we want 3 successful tenderers. So all of a sudden, and what they might say to you as part of that, are you able, in the case of an issue, to take on more than you actually want? So let's say you've got 33% of the business. They like to think you could do 50% of it. So if someone fell over, you'd have the resources, capacity, and capability to step in and cover for them. The second thing is an opportunity I didn't mention. You can form consortiums with people. So let's say, just briefly, one of the early ones I did 40 years ago was property services and the like. There was cleaning services, there was maintenance. Well, you've got a maintenance company and people and chippies and people form with a cleaning company. And one's a lead bidder, and you can actually bring your organisations together. Governments frequently work with consortiums that bring various skills and services together. Think of the construction industry. There might be people that bring management services, others building services, design and construct. They subcontract to sparkies and chippies and plumbers, all those sort of. So if you know a good company, I did this for a transport company not long ago, brought 2 transport companies here and they formed a bid together. And they joined their balance sheets and their history. And they look much better together than they did as a single unit. So that's a possibility.
Yeah, right.
There are lots of inventive, innovative ways to meet government requirements.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Pleasure.
Are you there, Rob?
I am.
Hello, Paul Kennedy here.
Hello, Paul.
Look, that was really good. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
During the presentation, I think you mentioned that you've got some, or you touched on the checklists.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, would you be happy to share a checklists with us in the chat at all?
I haven't got anything at my fingertips now, but certainly post this meeting we can do that. Have you got a specific mind of what sort of checklists you?
No, look, as I say, I very much enjoyed the way you took us through, and I suspect there are a number of common approaches irrespective of the actual tender. And I equally think that most of the people here tonight would love to see the things to cover off that we might not have thought of. I mean, you mentioned there about the financials. Well, we might not have thought of including that, whereas if you've got some checklists, perhaps could that be circulated through Nick to everybody?
Yeah, I know Nick's planning to send something out to everybody, but certainly things around policies and procedures you might have to meet, systems you've got to step up, those, absolutely. There's no issue.
Policies that you touched on as well, so yep.
There was a slide on that, and I'm sure that could be made available to you. It's public knowledge. It's just often you don't see it until you see it all piled up in a tender document.
Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, we've got Dr. Chris.
Yes, thanks, Nick. Rob, thank you very much for that presentation. Very comprehensive indeed, and sometimes overwhelming, but
It is.
But I just wanted to touch on, you mentioned consortiums, performing consortium, and just by way of interest, I've actually done that fairly recently with two colleagues. We each have a small business, and it turns out that our respective skills are very complementary, like it's 120 degrees, around the circle, so it's kind of perfect. The other thing is that at a business lunch the other day, the discussion came about Queensland government tenders particularly.
Yes.
And there's still the feeling around that small businesses can't get government tenders, even though the government says, no, that's not the case. And X million dollars are going to be allocated to small business. Getting those tenders is really quite challenging, which is probably one of the reasons why I've formed a consortium with a couple of others. So what are your comments on, have you heard anything about the Queensland governments in particular?
Look, I've done bids in recent times for Queensland clients and won them into Queensland government. But in fact, one of my qualifications, I have a master's degree in public sector management. So I've worked and I understand the frustrations and challenges on both sides, to be honest. But look, there is what the thing government won't do is show you how to do it. They'll say we wanted its government policy, Department of Finance, federal policy, that we are to give opportunities to SMEs. And I guess that's where myself and my colleagues fill that space. And if you do it in a measured, trained way, say leading up to the Olympics, if you had a particular offer for, say, uniforms or something, whatever it might be, now's the time to start building your credibility and your capability. And it's just a marginal addition to your budget. If you do it in the last 3-month rush, it'll maybe cost you $100,000 to get everything in play. And it's ridiculous. But that over 7 years is nothing. What's more, you're building elements to your business which increase its value, make you better manage. I mean, who could argue that having the quality systems and processes in place to manage your business is of no value to you only if you win an Olympic tender? So all I'm saying is if you're serious, you look at what needs to be done. It can be done at a marginal cost. You can set yourself up ready. You can start preparing and learning about what government needs. And at the end of the day, if you meet their criteria, your pricing's reasonable and you can do the job and you've got other contracts that will demonstrate it. There's nothing like a history doing something to demonstrate you're good at, as you would know in your consortium, then you've every chance of winning something.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, any other hands up here? Just having a look, and anything in chat. A lad says, I think this is with relation to NDIS. Is that right, Vlad?
No, just before then. We suggested meeting up for a coffee with the decision makers.
Yeah, yes, sorry, the question about that?
Yeah, it just seemed to me like if, I imagine if someone asked me to meet up for a coffee, I'd think, looks a bit untoward. Are they going to offer a bribe? Are they going to try and do something to subvert a future tender process? Because if someone got wind of that, they'd say, why did you meet up with this person who later got the tender?
So why didn't you meet up with this person?
If it became knowledge that you won a tender and you had meetings, face-to-face meetings with the decision makers, people would accuse you of shenanigans.
Well, they would only accuse you of shenanigans if they met up with you once they'd published the tender. Right? That there's an issue. Government will never meet with you privately once a tender's been published. And if you ask a question as part of the process and you want it answered, that question then is published and the answer is published to all of your competitors. That's what probity is about. But before you go to tender, getting relationships with people to understand what they require, we bid for this tender 3 years ago and failed. I'd like to talk to you about what are some of the things you look for that would help us get our act together. And remember this, it's important for the government to have as many healthy bidders bidding for the business as possible. That gives them the best choice. If only one or two people can deliver, then their choice is limited. It's in the interest of government and the taxpayer of your state and my state that there are enough viable providers of goods and services that can give government real choice. So it's not about the coffee. You might go to their office. I'd like to speak to you about this is where we're at. We're looking at doing these things. What would best position us to partake in the next tender process? Now, there's nothing about below board about that's all above board. It's completely logical. As I said to you, you would never marry a woman without knowing her, and she wouldn't accept your proposal before she got to know you. And relationships are key. People have this idea, government doesn't want that stuff. Now, you won't be taking them wining and dining and to dinner and that could be seen in a very poor light. But an odd coffee down in a coffee shop in the building where their offices are, or I'd like to catch up, I'd like to talk to you about a few things. I used to do it all the time.
Okay.
All right. Sandy, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Rob. Sorry, I can't switch on. I've got children here.
Oh, no problem.
But I'm in compliance and regulations and risk, and I really appreciate your presentation. But from my observation, I just wanted to add that coming in, working with SMEs, I find that compliance standard is very low or non-existent. And I think that would be a great starting point where small businesses just have that culture to be compliant, because once you have the basics covered, that's when you can now think of the next step, which is tenders. And it's a good conversation to have. So then people can start to think now to be compliant, and then that will put them in the right position to be able to be strategic and align with people in government for tenders.
I couldn't agree more. That's what I would describe as getting tender fit.
Yeah.
Getting your standards and processes up to compliance level where government can just tick the box and see you've got it. Now, I've had people say to me, well, can't we just write a work health and safety policy? Well, sure you can. But what's the system that implements it? And where you've had issues, say, at work, what government's impressed by, you had an issue, it went to your committee, it was discussed, a remedial action was designed and implemented, and then that collected when the policy was rewritten, so your policies are up to date. They want to see continuous quality improvement embedded in, not as an additional thing, but in the way you do business.
Yeah, because what it is now, it's not really about just ticking boxes and checking a checklist, and then it sits in your Google Drive and no one looks at it. No, it's actually how your team demonstrates the level of compliance on how they do things every day. And then when you're now going for tenders, all the boxes are ticked. But then you don't have to start to tick from that day when you're applying.
Well, those days are gone, Sandy. Those days have disappeared. The other thing I'd say that the government reserves the right on big contract to send a group of auditors in and check that you're doing all that you say you're doing. And many will do that on a regular basis.
Yeah, and also at the moment with SME space, there's a lot of new regulations and whatnot. So, one of the things is really for SMEs to get the knowledge and know which one applies to their sector, because it's across the board. It's not only in your sector, but then also, there's all these privacy things. There's, it's across the board. There's so many, but definitely, I think if the biggest takeaway tonight is for everyone to think within my sector, what applies to me, and just start to have that thought process and, line up your ducks so then you can be ready to go through and get these opportunities that are available.
That's absolutely accurate. And that's what I've spent the last 20, 30 years doing, helping people identify what's relevant to them, getting them fit, getting them to comply, having a record of having addressed issues, and use that continuous quality improvement process to update policies and procedures in a very real way.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for the question.
Excellent. Sounds like we need to get you on the show sometime, Sandy, too, to talk about this, being the expert in this field.
Yeah, totally.
I would love that.
I can feel a consortium coming on.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much all we've got time for. If you have any other questions at all, or want to sort of chat through anything with Rob, what's the best way to get in touch with you, Rob?
I think we've got phone, and I think we had a slide there. I didn't see there with phone numbers and email addresses, whatever, or LinkedIn, whatever. I don't think we've got anything up there at the minute, have we?
We've got, well, in fact, yeah, Rob's on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I've also just dropped the link into chat for if you're interested in finding out more about, becoming tender fit, the programs that are coming through that Rob has got. Just click on the link. That was the same link that was on that QR code. Just fill in the expression of interest. That doesn't commit you to anything. It just means that you are going to get the information as it's coming through. And I know that, Rob, you're putting together some processes and some programs there for people that are wanting to get into this whole tendering process, before particularly the Olympic Games are coming up, but also into, regular government tenders as well. That's
Absolutely.
right, isn't it? Yep.
Happy to help wherever we can.
Fabulous. Excellent. All right. Well, let's give Rob a big round of applause, or virtual hand there, however it works on Zoom.
Thank you.
And yes, thanks for coming on tonight. It's one of those, I suppose, one of those topics there that people rarely think about, and when we do think about it, it is with a bit of cold sweat, dread, and or sort of wanting to ignore it. But I think what you've really raised tonight are some important things that not only for becoming tender fit, but also for running and managing a good business as well. Good business practice as well.
Absolutely.
So,
And when people, I was going to say, Nick, when you mention this to people, it kills a dinner party if you tell people you work in tenders. Until Tinder went online, and people are talking about Tinder. What are you talking about? They got very interested for a short time.
But I'm a little concerned, Rob, that I think I have a slight Kiwi twang to my accent, yes. And so tender coach could have two different meanings there. Excellent. All right. Well, that is our session for tonight. There was a heap packed into it as well. If you do want to watch it again, it will be up on the Smashco YouTube channel tomorrow afternoon. If you're not a subscriber there, now's a good time to click on the link that is in chat. Go and subscribe to the channel. And when you do subscribe, hit that little bell button that appears after you subscribe. Then you'll get a notification as soon as the episode is published. That's normally up in the afternoon. If you know another small business or anyone else that might be interested in this as well too, send them along to that channel, share the link with them as well. Who knows, this might be the start of your consortium for the next round of tenders as well too. But certainly an eye-opening presentation there tonight around sort of tenders, got me sort of thinking about it as well. And actually, interesting enough, there was at a session that I was at, the Small Business Women's Lunch. You might wonder why I was there, but I was there with Jenny as the photographer. She was speaking. There were people there that were very small businesses that had won tenders as well. So size obviously isn't an issue in this realm, is it, Rob?
No, not at all.
Yeah. All right. So there is the YouTube channel. The other thing too, we have all of these episodes now going up onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So feel free to head over there. Again, just search Business Owners Smashing Online. The links are in chat as well too. So you can go and listen to some of your favorite episodes while you're working out at the gym, or possibly just sitting home in the evening. If you're not one of these people that work out at the gym, it works equally well with exercise or red wine, these episodes. All right, so now's probably a good time to save the chat. If you're not sure where that is, there are 3 little dots on the top right-hand side. That has got all of the links to the apps and tools in. It's got the link to the tendering site as well. Plus, there are links there to people's LinkedIn profiles if you do want to connect with people as well too. All right, well, that is our session for tonight. So again, thank you, Rob, for coming on tonight's session. Thank you, everyone, for coming along, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Have a good night. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast. You can also find me on social media and online. Just search for Business Owners Smashing It Online and Nick Cree, spelled Nikree, all one word. If you like this and want to hear more, subscribe now. Until next time, don't be a slave to your business. Get your business working for you.